Good morning, beautiful people. Happy Friday. I'm Babz Rawls Ivy. This is Lovebabz, Lovetalk, the Friday edition where I'm talking. And guess who is back?
Happy Friday.
Our spiritual lover, Enroue, Halfkenny is back.
Yes.
Hello.
Hi there. Good morning.
How are you?
I'm doing well.
Happy Friday.
Yes.
So, people have taken all the shows that you and I have done together and are listening to them back to back to back.
That's great.
Do you know how many people have stopped me about these shows?
I don't.
Are they not stopping you? Where are you? You're not in these streets like I am.
In stealth mode.
Because if they
Move
saw
like
you,
the wind.
if they saw you in these streets, they'd be at you like they at me. What's going on? What is that? Does he have some place where we can go?
So there are, so people always feel free to reach out to me directly.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have a website.
I tell them.
I have a website, healingandliberation.com.
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 Please go there.
And that just describes the variety of work that I do. So therapy work, spiritual work. There's some older like blog posts around some of the things I've done.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me. My phone number's there, email's there, so people can reach out really directly with some more, not just questions, but kind of the particulars of what they're seeking, what they want to know, or what this practice might be. And it doesn't mean some kind of big obligation or commitment needs to happen either.
Like you can still go to church.
People can do whatever they want.
Right.
I mean,
so I have to make
everyone's free.
See, I have to make that clear to people because they're intrigued and then they're freaked out.
But that's
they want something, but they don't know how to marry the two things.
Well, so there's a lot of challenges in that, like what that marrying means, and I think anytime there's something coming in that doesn't fit with how we have lived or normally think about things, it's really challenging because it can really, so I don't know the specifics of each particular person's dilemma, right? But I've had my own struggles and dilemmas and changes and transformations. And so it's not easy to kind of come to terms with things that seem so opposite. And so a good question is like, well, where is that either feeling that there's opposites, right? Or feeling like, oh, I can't do this, kind of where that's coming from and what you want to do with it. There are people who talk about Orisha worship and Orisha practice and kind of translate it in ways that are, I'll say, kind of more palatable to people who are Christian. Orisha represent these, or things like, how to kind of translate that in a way that it feels kind of more in alignment, so it doesn't feel like a kind of a theological or spiritual or kind of internal crisis. However, the difficult part of that is that you're kind of translating one system to fit into another, and so Orisha practice as a tradition is embedded in sacred literature, song, movement, culture, food, how we live in relationship with these forces, how we live in relationship with each other. And so it kind of has its own strength and foundation distinct from any other. And so just for example, I heard someone talk about, well, the Orisha are kind of like angels. Like that's a kind of way to understand them in kind of a Judeo-Christian Abrahamic system. And so because Christianity is not my kind of rooted religion, even though I know a lot about it, I have a certain idea about what that means. And they're the angels, but Orisha are not angels. like angels, just in terms of like how they fit into theology. Orisha, there are Orisha who are intimately involved in the creation of human beings. So there's an Orisha Obatala who is seen as the force that molded human beings, the bodies of human beings out of clay. And so there's stories around that.
And clay is very Judeo-Christian,
well,
Judeo-Christian. You know, clay. Like I'm always intrigued by the connection and threads of everything.
Right.
You know.
Right. So this isn't to say that there aren't ways that people can make connections. And I think it's important to understand kind of where there are also distinction. And so as far as I know, angels don't have a kind of role in the actual creation of human beings. Right?
Okay.
So theologically, they don't actually live in the same place. So there's not really that kind of parallel. Right? But in terms of forming how people might relate to them, like that might make more sense to people in like, oh, they're kind of like this, but they're not really like that. And so that's just an example of some of the complexity of how to treat things as equal so that someone can kind of go like, oh, I'm on like the A train, I'm just going to walk across the platform and get on the C train. You know, to just this, as you know, people who've been to New York, right? Just kind of walking across. Almost like we don't have the A and the C here in New Haven. And I'm originally from Boston, so we wouldn't do that there either. Like we get on the red line, the green line, you know. But anyway, you know, it's not just kind of walking across a platform and, oh, now I just sit here and kind of continue on my journey. There's real change and there's real difference of thought and difference of relationship and difference of accountability. And that is also important. Not to say that people can't find their way. And one of the aspects of many indigenous practices, and the Orisha tradition is one of them, is there's a sense of flexibility in even how many Orishas there are. So
I was just going to ask how many, and do people pick and choose what suits them, what speaks to them, what they need in the moments?
Yeah,
because it could change, maybe.
Yeah, so it's a yes and.
Okay.
So in terms of numbers, there are between probably 7 and 9 Orisha who are seen as primary, and that's seen primary mostly here in the diaspora, and that actually has a lot to do with what people could hold on to because of the institution of slavery. So it's very different when you're living embedded in a culture where there's so much multiplicity, and when you're ripped out of that and brought somewhere where there may be 1 or 2 people who are like you, things get pared down really fast. And so there are some kind of major Orishas which many people around the world know about. So there's Oshun, who is a kind of a female divinity who also is represented with actually a particular river. There's an Oshun River in Oshogbo.
So who was Beyonce calling up?
So that was an aspect of Oshun. So
okay. Because that color dress,
gold,
yes, is the defining thing.
There's wisdom, there's strength, there's sensuality and sexuality involved. There's motherhood involved. There's healing involved. Really holding communities and creativity. So those are, each Orisha have certain energies and certain aspects. And so in worship, we connect with those based on how we're feeling, based on what we need, what we're looking for. Just like, you know, if my car is having trouble, I go to the mechanic. I don't go to a pizza shop, right? But when I'm hungry, I go get food, right? So it's not that, you know, they're kind of indiscriminate. But when we really want to tap into something based on the kind of support that we need, then there are a variety of kind of forces to do that. So just like, you know, it feels different to like be at the ocean than it feels to be on a mountaintop, than it feels to be by a river. That's some of that understanding. Like these elements and these divine aspects and these divine beings have different energies, and so we have a different relationship with them.
So Enroue, is this type of worship done in congregation, or is it done by yourself?
Yes. Right? There are communities that worship together.
Okay.
And people worship on their own.
Okay.
I mean, don't other people do that?
Yes.
So why would this be really different in that way? Right?
That's a good point. Right? I'm asking.
Yeah. No, I know. But that's also like this. So part of the challenge is not to just say like, well, you should know, but some of those things are those are actually where a lot of commonalities are.
Okay.
Right? Oh, there's sacred literature. There's this is also an experiential system, right? So this is about like our experience and our relationship with these forces, with our ancestors, with the Orisha, with our human being communities, with the earth, with animal communities, with seen and non-seen forces, right? We're actually interacting with and relating to, in some way, shape, or form, all of these forces all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so part of the purpose is, how do we live in harmony with all these things? And how do we live in harmony in such a way that is also connected to our particular purpose and our particular destiny and why we're here? And so all of that is about fitting in, but not to like let go of ourselves to fit in, but like, how do we join something in a way where we can be as whole as possible? And so there are kind of various ways of doing that. So to get back to this piece around like Orisha and kind of picking and choosing. So on one hand, in like your regular worship, you can connect with these different forces. So let's say there's some aspects of really wanting a kind of support. I mean, sometimes people will literally go to like Oshun or different Orisha because they really want to have a family. They want to have children. And so they would go to either this river in Oshogbo. There's actually an annual festival of like thousands and thousands of people. It's a pilgrimage that people make in Oshogbo. People of all faiths go because they recognize the power and the place of this force and what it can really do for them and what it can do for community. And so someone may go to Oshun and make offerings and pray to like have a baby, to have healthy children, something of that nature. And so that's kind of one layer of worship. Then there's kind of a deepening of a relationship with these forces where someone may kind of in a ceremony receive the icons of this Orisha. So may receive some consecrated items that are connected to it. So they bring that into their home. And so people have both ways of.
And how do you get those things? You have to show up somewhere?
Well, like a priest or priestess would consecrate those things.
Like you?
For you. Yes.
Because you're a priest.
Yeah, so I'm a priest. So I'm a priest not of Oshun. I'm a priest of a different Orisha named Ifa. Okay. So my title is as a Babalawo or as an Awo Ifa, which means so Babalawo means is like a male priest of Ifa. So it's a father of secrets. And the other term is a Yan Ifa, which is like a mother of Ifa. Awo is kind of a non-gendered term. So Awo Ifa could be male or female. Okay. But someone who's a priest or priestess, and one becomes that through not just through kind of a consecration or ordination, but through what's called initiation. So initiation means that the person really receives literally into their body through ceremony, through ritual, the energy of that Orisha. So it's it's kind of a deepening of an intimacy with that Orisha. Now, people can be initiated and it doesn't make them a priest or priestess.
I was going to ask, because how about if I don't want to be
You don't have to be.
People
can be initiated because of like emergencies or health reasons and aren't particularly deep in their practice of worshiping Orisha. And there are people who get initiated after like long study. There are also people who never get initiated and who are very knowledgeable and are deep in their practice. And they just, for whatever reason, that's not a part of their path. That's not a part of how they are relating to these Orisha. Now, in terms of initiation, the Orisha chooses the person. So I might, I love going to the river, or I love going to the ocean, so I want to be initiated into Oshun, or the ocean is Olokun. And I go and I say, well, I want to be initiated into these Orisha. So what a person does, what a priest of that tradition does, or a priest of Ifa will do, is they do what's called a divination. So they do a spiritual reading to communicate with these forces and say, well, what is best? What is in line with this person's destiny?
It's like, okay, Babz, you come to the beach, but you are not about the beach.
Right, right.
So you might have to go look somewhere else.
So, right, it doesn't mean that you can't still worship
right.
Olokun, but it means that the intimacy of the connection might be with another force. And that has something to teach you that's connected to your destiny and your purpose. And there's specific messages that come out. And so in terms of initiation, kind of the divinities are choosing the people.
Wow.
But even after being initiated, I still worship all the other Orisha. I just have a particularly intimate relationship with Ifa. And then also because that's my study, I have a specialty knowledge about that. So after initiation, what makes a person a priest or a priestess is learning and study and training.
Like any other priest
else.
or priestess.
Exactly. And so then that becomes, connected to how somebody wants to be related to their community and how they want to be related to the Orisha. It's not the ultimate is not for everybody to be in that role because we all have different destinies. We all have a different purpose.
Wow. So I'm fascinated by, because that sounds very Harry Potter to me. Do you ever seen the Harry Potter movies where the hat chooses?
I was wondering, I was like, where?
The hat chooses where what house you are in, right? Yeah. Like you could say, I want to be over there, and you put the hat on, and the hat says, you don't go over there, and you're like, what?
But I thought I really wanted.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is so we also have our own Orisha. We have our own divinity, and that's actually it's called our Ori Inu. Ori is the word for head. So it's actually like our own inner head is connected to our destiny and our purpose in a very direct way. And so in many ways, that's like where we start. And so even if, we want a new car, we want this kind of job, we want that kind of job, it's actually our own head and our own destiny which chooses that. So in some ways, like this kind of, choosing hat, we actually have like this head that we chose in heaven before we were born. And so we chose our destiny, which is really a potential for something. We still have to work. We still have to manifest that. We have to choose where on our path we want to go. We don't just kind of kick back and let it unfold. But that also resides kind of literally in our head. And there are a lot of sacred verses around how actually that's in some ways more important than our relationship with these other Orisha. Because without our head, we're not going anywhere.
Wow. Right? And that, that speaks to that speaks to the foundation of just about everything. In any spiritual practice, it starts with self. Right. Like you gotta tap in. Yeah. You can't just be looking outward for guidance and divination. That you have to dig deeper and look inside.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I feel all of that.
Yeah. And make those choices.
And own those choices.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So this is not far-fetched. This is real.
So this
personal.
Yeah. So I think there's a way in which, so like we're all human beings, and we're all doing our best, and we actually can't do it all by ourselves. And there are things outside of our control. There are things outside of our perception, and we're still connected to them. And so just as human beings, so particular people in particular places developed particular ways to connect with these forces. And so the Yoruba people and the people in that part of West Africa kind of developed this kind of technology and language and practice, with the sacred forces and beings there, with an understanding of this kind of expansiveness. So as I was saying, there are different Orisha that many people know in the diaspora. So like Oshun, Shango, Oya, Olokun, Yemanja, Obatala, Eshu, Ogun, Oshosi, and maybe some I'm forgetting. But there are some that are kind of known in Brazil, in Cuba, in the United States, in places in Europe, in Asia, and Africa. Kind of these known body of Orisha. But in terms of theology, it's recognized that there are like 400 plus one Orisha. Okay. And what's interesting, what I always found interesting is this plus one notion. So the plus one is not 401. It's, so who knows how many? because they're also very connected to place. And so there may be these like Orisha, which manifest as like hurricane and tornadoes, like Oya, right, which people recognize and have experience with, and there's creative and destructive powers in that. And I wonder what this Orisha like West Rock is, right? And so that's here, right? So someone in New York or California don't know about this, but the tradition says, well, we're going to honor that that's possible, because we see how it's about place and it's about land and our relationship with these things. And since the world is big, that's the +1, the kind of flexibility that's there.
I see. Oh wow, that's quite fascinating. Yeah. So what made you we talked about this, but there's a lot of sort of similar kinds of things. Mm-hmm. This called you.
Mm-hmm. Well, the thing that called me was an experiential relationship with the divine through nature.
Yes.
That's what called me. Mm-hmm. And then this provided, when I came across this, this provided a tradition and community and a practice. Otherwise, there's a way in which because of the United States and because of colonialism, we pick and choose and we kind of consume things, mm-hmm. right? And so, I like how these people over here do this, so I'm going to take a little bit of that. And I like how these people do it, so I'm going to take a little bit of that. Now I have this kind of, that's what the New Age movement has really kind of commodified in that way. Like, mm-hmm. you can go online and you can get a little this thing here and that thing there, and you suit it up, and like, I got my things, and look, I'm doing the hoo-ha and whatever. And for me, both because of issues of like appropriation and kind of what that means, mm-hmm. but also I wasn't really convinced. How would I know if I was just making something up just because it felt good? And I actually felt a need. I said, these things are bigger than me, and I'm not the first human being to want to have some experiential relationship with them. And so there's also a part, what this did, it also provided a means to surrender into that. Like, I don't have to have this figured out, and there are people who know, and so maybe I can learn and maybe I can surrender with the kind of constant feedback of like, oh yeah, this is working.
And you could feel yourself drawn to what was happening.
Yeah.
Okay.
Even as like, I don't understand that. Like, that's really, And so it requires. So this is the discomfort. So it also requires changing and thinking. Like, so like my relationship with my ancestors is still alive and moving. And it's different because they're not here in body, but I can connect to them and access them and continue this relationship in a way that's relevant, not in like this, they've all elevated to some magical enlightened place and they're just gonna like pour mana and wonderfulness on me and I can just kind of kick back. But like, there's complexity there, there's healing that I have to do there, there's my so for example, my my father's father passed away in 1988, and I got into this tradition in like 92, 93. And I realized, like, setting up my ancestor altar and like, here I am kind of talking to them, and this is what's real and what's relevant. That had a lot of anger towards my grandfather. And that anger was based on some misperceptions, but also some things that like he had done, how he had behaved towards my father, and how that was painful, but also how I felt that impacted me. So like, what is this chain of disconnection or harm that was there? And so for a while, I was just like wrote angry letters to him and like put him on my altar and like talked to him and like allowed that. And for me, kind of expressing that in that way was really challenging, because it was this, how do I have the complexity of like, well, I love him and I'm really sad that he's gone and mourning, and I'm really angry, mm-hmm. and I don't know what to do. And like, I can actually still work that out. I can still be in that. And then it shifted. At some point it shifted, and my relationship with him is different. I mean, it was different. It didn't take very long, but mm-hmm. it was a process. And also people have different experiences about what it is for them. So I used to believe, kind of coming into these traditions, and also being at certain ceremonies and celebrations where, people are catching the spirit, people are getting possessed, And this idea that like that is the gold standard. Well, that really shows this like deep connection, this authentic connection. Like they're embodied in, oh my goodness. And that's not true. And actually what I then learned is that traditionally in West Africa, there are particular people who are designated as the channel for that divinity. And in celebration and in ceremony, they become possessed and they actually like travel around the town and they say blessings for people and they receive things and they give prayer. Like there's a relationship, but it's like, it's part of a system. It's not, I mean, it can happen, but it's not random and it's not like dug after, because there's knowledge about like what it means and how to do it and how we cultivate ourselves in a way that that's a part of what we understand. And
it sort of frees you up to sort of say, because if you don't ever reach that,
right?
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, there's a feeling of like, oh, I'm not really something enough.
Because that's how I grew up Pentecostal, and you know, real saints would jump in the aisles and shout and praise, and was feeling it and would, you know, speak in tongues and the whole thing. And if you couldn't do that, you just felt like, well, God is not really paying attention to me, or I'm just not open enough, or.
And then what are the like performative aspects of it, or the kind of really ritualized aspects of it, and am I enough, or dismissive of it? But there's complexity in there, and what I really learned and really understood that again, it's about who we are. And so some people, you know, in the midst of whatever their practice is, you know, are not, don't feel it move through them necessarily, right? They experience it. It may be like, I'm thinking about this, or there's comfort that I may like understand or feel, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. That's not. And less
feelings
than.
are fleeting. I think feelings about things are fleeting. Can't really depend on them for total guidance. Right. Because that's where the practice comes in. If you, you see what I'm saying?
Well, you're right. There's like a discerning. It's a practice and it's a process. Yeah. And I don't even want to say like, oh, this is what it looks like. Here's the trajectory. So for some people, it can seem light, right, in terms of what they see, what they experience with other people. And other people, it's strong, and like they will see and talk to and listen to their ancestors who are sitting next to them, right? And that is their real experience. And all of that has actually much more to do with kind of who we are, what we bring, what's being passed down to us, right? So there are people who are sensitive in different ways. And that's also just a part of, you know, again, it's not like the goal, but it's a part of our cultivation and development. And how do we use who we are as a being to continue to connect and relate to all these forces?
Okay, so the last time we talked, you said, get outside.
Yes.
Like, you know.
Did you?
Because, I'm outside all the time.
Good.
I love being outside. I was just at the beach the other day. But I like being outside because I feel connected. Yeah. When I'm outside, when I'm walking, you know. Yeah. And I haven't walked enough in a very long time. So to be outside is quite holy for me. Yeah. I call the beach church because that's and the waves God is speaking, right? Yeah. Like, because I just find that peaceful to my spirit. Yeah. So you tell people to get outside, and then what happens when they're outside?
Right. So one is just to be outside, because in this culture, in general, there's, I think, a real unhealthy disconnection with nature and being outside. We are a part of nature, and it's for many reasons. The earth and nature has been, well, many reasons, mostly like colonialism and capitalism, right? It's been turned into a commodity, turned into a resource to manage versus something to be in relationship with. And so number one is just to be outside, to allow yourself to feel and to experience something else, which in my belief is actually very nurturing in a really fundamental way. The other piece in terms of this practice and this tradition is not just to be outside, but for example, you know, going to the ocean, right? So you're receiving something. And so a relationship is really based on this two-way communication and a two-way interaction. And the way we do that in this tradition is we bring offering. So sacrifice is a fundamental part of this system. And so that means that can be our behavior that we're sacrificing, right? We're both making sacrifices to be here, right? There are other places we could be, right? It can fit in that way.
Yep.
But also it could be like an item. So it could be fruits or flowers or all kinds of things that are part of sacrifice. So the point is less, I mean, items can matter, but it's really the relationship building. Just like if you like somebody, right? Like, oh, well, let me take you out to dinner, or let me make you something, right? It's like you're feeding each other.
Yes.
In relationship. And so these are the ways that we also do this with these forces. So going out in nature. And so sometimes before, if I'm going into the woods, since I love the woods a lot, particularly for like I guess a more like spiritual connection, though it's something, I mean, I kind of also do it anyway because I'm feeling that most of the time, and that's kind of the place that nature plays, the relationship I have with it. And so when I go in, I'll pause, and at the very least, even if I don't have something, I'll just like pause and maybe like put my hand on a stone that seems significant, or a tree or something, and thank all the beings that are there.
Wow.
Thank all the ancestors who are there, who I can see, who I can't see, and just thank them for this space that I'm about to enter into. And also say, like, I hope that, my experience here, my being here, is respectful. It's like you're going to someone's house, right? So I'm entering into a space, and if I'm going there with a particular intention, to state that, to say, like, I really need some healing, and I hope that I'm able to receive that, and I hope that I can be in a good relationship with you. And I say that in a way that makes sense to me, but this is the kind of theme behind it. And if I have something, I'll leave it there, and if I don't, I'll say that I don't have anything, but like I'm really hoping I can still be in a good relationship with you. It doesn't have to be transactional in that way. And then I enter in, and that is both kind of stems out of this tradition, and it also like feels so right in terms of being there. It's like, oh, now I can, there's an ease, there's like, I don't feel like I'm like just storming through, I'm just trying to get what I want to get, or I can listen differently. And part of these practices for me is about really deep listening, because there's so much going on, and there's also so much noise that to be connected to the things that are important to like being as whole of a human being as possible, I have to listen really deeply, because those voices are really subtle, right? And they're really tender.
Absolutely.
And live in a deep, really personal place. And like nature has been that place for me. And so that's the place that, when we talk about what originally kind of sparked this, it was that place of, feeling, if I were to imagine like feeling as free as possible, it's there where, I step away from how I think I should be. I step away from how I think others think I should be, or what I think they think I should be, or how I should be. And all that goes. And there's a real ease that's possible there, that I don't feel other places. And other people feel that kind of way in other places, and that's fine. But it's that was the thing that also really prompted, like, so, I mean, I had studied science before that, so I studied biology and was like kind of understood ecology in these systems. And I said, so this is like a really complicated system, interrelationships, and it's so much greater than me, and I feel so connected to it, and I can be here, and I can't con it or manipulate it or fool it in the same way that like so many human being interactions. Like I can't just rely on like my mask, regardless of how I feel about that mask. It's actually relating to like something else, like a reality, an experience. If I want to like make a fire, I can't like convince it. I have to like do something, right? I have to like take the time to like, let me build, and then it may work really successfully and it may not. And like, that's out of my control, right? So like these things, I like, oh, there's something here. There's something here. And I didn't know what it was.
So what are you reading? How do we read about this? Is there books? Who's writing these books?
There's...
Can I go to Barnes and Noble and find one or two books that'll get me started? Like,
so,
because those of us who have high intellectual aspiration, we need a book.
Right. So, yes, there are books. Finding good books is not easy, but it also,
and they're not easy because
there's a lot of
foolishness.
A lot of ways that people will like blend things because it works for them, and then it gets presented. So you know, I live here in the diaspora, in the African diaspora, right? I'm a U.S. citizen, born and raised here. This is such a foundation of how I think of things, and I really had to undo a lot of learning, and kind of indigenous traditions and earth-based traditions have really helped move that. And so one thing, and one of the reasons, so one part of my brain is like, so I know you really want to read a book, but this is about something different. Right?
Okay.
Like if you wanted to read a book, if you wanted to become a Christian, someone say, well, what are the books that I should read? How would you answer that? Right? There's some really good.
Well, everybody would say start with the Bible.
Right.
I would not invite people to start with the Bible.
Which Bible?
There you go.
Right. So again, if we look at like what is the parallel question, right? So it's really open and expansive. And while there are aspects of the sacred literature, because there's a sacred literature or literatures, most of it is oral. There's a lot that's being written down. But people's understandings, just like the Bible, people's understandings of worship and a practice does not only come from that text. It is informed by it. There's information about it. There's lessons and teachings in it. And it is still fundamentally about your relationship, how you understand that, and how you learn about it, like with your ancestors, with these forces. So yes, there are some things to read. So I would say anything by my main teacher and godfather, Wande Abimbola, Abimbola. Anything by him is wonderful.
So when you get a chance as you're doing this to put it in this.
That's my epic to-do list.
Yes.
Because people ask that all the time. And so
you don't have to do 100, but
no, I know,
but
I
one or two.
Give them something.
Yeah.
And I have a couple of things, and I also know that like the practice is more than that.
Yes.
Like, we all want to understand, and like.
Well,
so
we're trained.
I love it, right? And
I mean, we're
love
trained,
the
right?
ways these things are put together, and like who are these forces and how do they interact, and these stories like that. To me, is super wonderful and amazing, and the place that it really lives. So I was talking to this about someone recently, and it's, make these offerings, say your prayers, and listen.
Yes, that's what I tell people in spiritual direction. That's hard.
Yeah, and
because they think it should be more.
There's a desire for like what's the right way.
Should be more,
and what's the right way. So this is going to tell me the right way. And so the challenge is, so for example, someone, I haven't read the book because it doesn't interest me. But like there's someone who's like, oh, so here are these parallels with like the Orisha and chakras. So they wrote something. It's like, so these Orishas relate to these chakras and all these things. And it's like, well, you can do that, right? In a similar way that like all the Orishas like angels, and you're actually then creating something else. And so don't present it as this is the Orisha tradition. Say, I like how these two things are in my life and they fit together in this way. And isn't this interesting? But people don't usually do that. Right, they're like, this is this.
This is the definitive thing.
And so, and this gets in this whole question of like, well, what's like orthodoxy and what is traditional and what's not, and like how the diaspora has grown and also has its own practices. And so, I don't want to get into that, but I also think that in a similar way that to learn a skill, the tradition of apprenticeship, the tradition of learning from a person who can actually make it relatable to really what you're dealing with is important. And is important not just because of like, you got to go to this person, they're going to kind of tell you how it is, but that's also a different way of learning that has been erased and lost in this country, in a way of thinking that how do we really learn from people, and what do our elders have to teach us, and what are these relationships with people that are also important, and how do I, we can all read the same thing and have these different interpretations, and then we also put all this power in this written word, and start to let go a little bit of what are also the ways that we cultivate our intuition, we cultivate an ability to touch those really relevant, deep, tender places. And so like I talk to people about like how to pray, because I didn't know how to pray, and like how to do it not like, well, I pray for peace and I pray for, the good things, but like, I really need help, and I need, I'm working on this project, or like, I just had this argument, with my partner, and I don't know what to do, and I'm really angry, or like I need a job, and like being in those places, or I really need some healing. Like I'm struggling with these things, and in that place, touch upon it and speak it. Because if we don't speak the things we need, how are we going to get that kind of support?
Yeah.
Right.
That's real.
And that's
but that's beyond this though.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's what it is.
Right. And so there are books which kind of say that.
Mm-hmm.
And there's relationships that help to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yes, I'll put some things down so that people can read them, aiming them at some things that I guess I can kind of get behind, right? That kind of don't add too much or stretch things too much a little bit. And like, it's really, if people have specific questions, I mean, there's stuff on the internet, and you just gotta like be careful, because like there's junk out there, just like with everything else.
Mm-hmm.
And things can be presented in a way that it's really palatable, and like, oh, this is yes. And then you come to learn later on, like, oh, like they kind of made some of that up, or it's not really like that, or they took some liberties, or they like whatever it is, or they're just trying to get your money. I mean, there's a whole, just like any other tradition,
mm-hmm.
There are these kind of same things.
So are you interested in having a workshop?
Yeah, so it's something that I'm kind of in the process of developing. And so really to have something, have an evening where I'm talking about this and people can come and continue to ask questions.
Because I would appreciate that.
Yeah. And also what's been important is not just the kind of talking about it, but inviting people to a practice. And I've been working with more and more people about having an ongoing practice. And so I just meet with them, and we make offerings together, and we pray, and then they ask me questions, and I talk about it, and both like kind of what's the theology, right? What's the understanding? What's this kind of cosmology around it, as well as what's happening in their lives, and how to access and use the relevance of their lives. Because so many times people don't feel like they can really bring that to a practice. Somehow the practice, they have to like get it right first.
Yeah.
And then do the...
I have those conversations with people in spiritual direction.
Yeah.
They just like, I'm not worthy or whatever. I was like,
I don't know what to say.
No,
like,
you
okay,
do.
So
you're talking to me. You're saying it.
Well, so pray for the words.
Yeah.
Like, help me to have the words. Help me to touch what's in here and bring it out so that it can have some movement.
And you're on today with your wife at 1.
At 1 o'clock. Yeah, I'll be right back here.
Are y'all doing the same kind of thing, or is this some food inspired thing?
No,
too?
Very similar. Okay. Kind of a slightly different track, because she's also a practitioner.
Mm-hmm. I did not know that.
Yeah, and actually she kind of came about it separately than I did, and it was one of the things that we had in common when we met.
Oh. See, I didn't know that about her. I just knew the Jewish part.
Yep.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
Oh, I could have been talking to her too.
Yeah. Yes.
I enjoy talking to you.
Right.
I still can, but I enjoy talking to you too. So I think you were directed to me. So directed to me. So that's, so that's good. All right. Well, this has been amazing as always. Thank you.
Enjoyed it.
Getting back outside.
Well, thank you. Yes. Gotta bundle up though. That this kind of chill just like cuts deep. So.
And so you'll put up a couple of books.
Yeah.
That we could think about or look at or read.
Yeah.
Because I'm one of these people. I can feel things very deeply, but I think sometimes a book helps me sort of
have an understanding of it differently.
It gives me some housing.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yeah, and that's. I mean, I have done the same thing, and I continue to find things that are interesting to read and relevant and expand my understanding, because I don't know everything at all. I mean, it's a vast
But I
system.
trust your judgment, because if I get out there, I'll mess around and find something that feels confusing. Okay. Oh, this feels good.
Yeah, and how would you know?
Yeah.
That's the thing. Like, how would you know?
How would I know?
Yeah. Okay, know? A, B, C. Great. That must be no.
And then I'm like, oh, no, that's not it at all. I was like, okay.
But even that, I would say, like, that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's learning. And, like, we don't know. Because these traditions have been actively erased from us. Right? And so, of course, we don't know. And so, of course, we're curious. And, of course, we may feel like something's missing and something is not enough for us. And so we have to also be gentle with ourselves to kind of find our way back to that, because in that finding our way back, there's a lot of unlearning, a lot of healing. You know, you can't just walk outside and like see all the signs that are pointing you in the same direction. And that's real also. And so, yeah, put stuff up and like let people explore, and that's fine. And like anything else, people learn, you know, find their way. And I would just say to also use the same kind of discretion, because it can be challenging, like finding you know, spiritual teachers. We're like, oh, I'm just gonna like surrender myself to this person and all these things, and people kind of forget to still be like discerning and use, you know, the tools that have kept them safe, you know, before that. And it's challenging because like, so for me, really opening myself up to a new tradition, like I want to learn this, and they have these answers. They have like the key to this door. And then realizing like, oh, I've also fallen into some a relationship and some things that are also kind of abusive and stuff around like power. And so having to like work to like sift that out is really challenging. So that's the journey, right? That's why this is all a journey, and there isn't the quick fix. There isn't the, like, if I get this book, I'm gonna learn it, or if I get this one person, they're gonna give it to me, give everything. Because there's a lot of healing that has to happen in like finding our way with people, and that's part of the reason why people want the book or the website, because it's like, well, I can just do it on my own, and I don't need to deal with the complexities of kind of interpersonal stuff. I mean, that's what happened with me. I was like, I don't trust someone to tell me what this relationship is,
and then it just leads you back to people to tell you what this thing is.
Well, because we're connected, and like I can't figure it all out. And if I want help, then I can go to people, and they've had something there, and they've had some tools for me to then be open more and more and more. And you know, people have their own paths of doing that, but you know, that's also part of all this.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
You'll be back.
I will.
2 weeks. 2 weeks he'll be back. Check us out. Thank y'all for listening in. I appreciate it. And I'll see y'all. Thank you.
Have a wonderful day. Thank you, Babz.